Could be a bit difficult, couldn't it? Anyway, let's have a look at the newspapers, what's making headlines around the world today. And we start with the Financial Times. It has an interview with the man in charge. You can see him there, Larry Page of Google. It's launching an online form, making it easier for people in Europe to request the company censor links about them. That's of today. The FT says the right to be forgotten court ruling may damage new internet startups.
Interesting. How about this one? The Moscow Times has a triple handshake between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Kazakhstani and Belarusian counterparts. They've created a new Eurasian Economic Union, a notable absence, though, of course. A bit of a hole, Ukraine.
Interesting one. The referendum campaign for Scotland's independence is underway officially, and the country's First Minister proponent Alex Salmond claims it's one of the richest nations. A study in The Guardian, however, suggests it only has a middle-ranking economy.
Looking for a new cheap home? How about this? Try Spain. Well, that's in the International New York Times. It's a report that global bargain hunters are buying up, because they're snapping up property because of prices which had fallen or have fallen by about 50%.
In the Gulf News Financial Pages, a report on the battered US economy. It's in many other papers as well, which has seen its worst performance since early 2011 in terms of growth.
And what do you think of this one, Sal? It's goodbye to hefty financial advice bills. A regulation agency says computers may replace expensive advisors to provide sound investment tips.
Let's press 3 for this, press 4 for that.
Bye.
Drives me around the twist. We're joined by Cornelia Mayer, CEO of MRL Corporation, to talk us through these stories in the papers. Always lovely to see you, Cornelia.
Wonderful
Good morning.
to be here. Good morning.
Good morning, Cornelia.
Now let's start with the Financial Times, which has got this, what it calls an exclusive interview with Larry Page, and they've timed it on the day that Google has to make available this online form to allow Google users in Europe to request the censorship of information about them that they perceive as damaging.
Yeah, and that's something where I really can see both sides, because it's really bad if something is in the internet, in the World Wide Web, about you that you disagree with. There was no place you had the recourse. And now the European Court of Justice said, no, this is not right, and you have to have that layer of the right to appeal, and then the company has to take the link or whatever off the net. But I can also see Larry Page's view when he says, if we have that onerous bureaucracy, it will be harder for startups. Google can deal with this. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. But if you're the next best, brightest internet thing, having to compliance is an expensive process.
It very much is. But also his argument is it strengthens the hands of repressive governments, because they could arguably ask for this censorship, and there's this public interest argument. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
It's a minefield, because on one hand you say yes, it can, you know, you see in Turkey and other places where they say, well, you know, we'll take Twitter off, and nice people like Mr. Putin, who are not very happy about too much internet activity in Chinese governments. But you know, the governments will do as they want anyhow in more repressive regimes.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of tech experts sort of say to me that nowadays there's no such thing as internet privacy. So you remove the information, then where does it go? It's still out there somewhere, isn't it?
Yes, but you make it harder for people to put things in there that people disapprove of, which, you know, is a good thing.
Also as well, the article says that Google will announce today, or expected to announce today, a panel that will talk about privacy responsibilities. As you say, they're a big company. They can afford to do these things, can't they? But let's now move on.
Shall we talk about the Moscow
Times?
Times? You know, I was talking about this story yesterday on air, and look, I find this fascinating. So this Eurasian Union being formed, you know, and you look at Russia and Kazakhstan. I mean, some mighty natural resources in this new bloc, and I'm just wondering, how much power does that give them to
It gives them some power. But what you see is Putin has been on the record for saying the worst thing in the 20th century was the demise of the former Soviet Union. And he's putting it bit by bit, he's putting the former Soviet Union back together again. So yes, it makes them resource rich, but the backside of that is if you export resources, you can't trade with each other, so they will not become a strong trading bloc amongst themselves. But we've seen also with Gazprom, the Gazprom deal with China earlier this month showed us they're looking further east. Part of this is to spite, you know, the West and what's going on with the Ukraine. Part of it is also we in the West, we're also looking more at Asia. You know,
Sure.
Asia has always been, the 21st century has always been the Pacific century.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and at
this
the
is
end of
just
the
happening.
day, can I say, at the end of the day, there's nothing, you know, some in the West may go, well, oh, this is maybe a little scary, but there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, you've got North America, you've got Asia, as you're saying, and you've got the European Union. Why not have a Eurasian pact?
Yes, but it is very much a reactionary pact in reaction of what has happened. And Russia feels that with the extension of NATO ever eastward, they feel sort of threatened through that.
Just remind everybody about the resource. I mean, we were talking about the oil and gas, the reserves you mentioned.
Yeah, the reserves. It's about
in this pact.
In this pact, it's about 20% of global gas reserves and 15% of oil reserves. But we still have other countries with gas and oil.
Right, now we must move on.
Yes,
we must move
go
on.
on.
So we're talking about countries there coming together. Now we're talking about one trying to break free. And The Guardian looks at how wealthy or how economically viable Scotland is on its own. And as we've said, the formal campaign for the referendum on Scotland's independence starts today. Give us your take on the Guardian's analysis.
Well, it's very interesting because we saw yesterday we had Alex Salmond and Danny Alexander giving the pro staying in the union, pro going out of the union aspects, and they were miles apart. I mean, the numbers are floating all over the place. We saw that the oil and gas, the revenues from oil and gas were between 7 billion and 3 billion. So this here says, well, a lot of the wealth is not owned, a lot of the companies are not Scottish owned. That doesn't really matter.
How does, you know, the normal man, woman in the street in Scotland make a decision, given the fact that, as you say, the information is so far apart, the arguments are so different?
No, it's scary. I don't know how they make a decision. The arguments are very far apart. And we had this poll that said $500 plus, $500 minus, staying in the union, leaving the union will sway the electorate so much. So this is actually quite scary. At some stage, I hope some economists will come to a consensus of what it really all means. Don't think so.
Absolutely.
This is interesting, perhaps, because it's in the International New York Times saying, you want a cheap property? Go to Spain. And I'm sure a lot of British people watching this right now know that during the crisis, property prices took a hammering.
And they've lost money. I mean, a lot of them own these properties that have lost 50% of value.
And real estate is always a very illiquid asset. But what I would say here is that's all nice, but it actually is also worrisome because the big problem about Spain is it's an unbalanced economy. Everything was on real estate and tourism. What Spain needs is manufacturing and things that really create, jobs. We still deal with the 25% youth unemployment. So that's all very nice, but it does do little for the Spanish economy as a whole.
Very quickly, Gulf News business section, US economy battered by harsh winter. This talks about those growth figures out yesterday that surprised everybody. Or exactly.
Negative growth.
Negative growth,
US in reverse. Were you surprised?
No, I was not surprised, but I was surprised by... No, I don't think so. I was surprised by the magnitude because we expected between 0.1 and 0.5% decline, and we got a 1% decline. But when you then dig further down, a lot of it is in falling inventories. So that will be stocked up again.
And the weather, of course.
The weather, but the weather always has an impact.
But it was extraordinary.
It was extraordinary. And you can't do constructions when it's that cold. You can't do a lot of economic activities just cease. People can't get to work.
We're going to stop in about 25 seconds. Would you take advice from a computer, financial advice?
No, but I drive all my financial advisors nuts because I don't take advice from anybody anyhow.
Not you, surely not.
Why are we not surprised to hear that from Cornelia Mayer this morning? So lovely to have you on the programme. Thank you for coming in
Great to see you.
so early. And lovely to have your company too. Stay with the BBC. We'll see you soon.